Crowds of soldiers filled the trenches. Uncountable batteries towered above them, pointing at the sky and watching for any sign of threat. Nervous silence filled the air. For many on the ground, it would be the last quiet moments in their life. A shell exploded in the upper atmosphere, intercepted by the anti-air defense. Thousands more followed in its trail. The overpowering noise of the explosion pierced eardrums and reverberated in the bones. The Siege of Terra has started. Welcome to our series on Warhammer 40k and the Horus Heresy, explaining the origins of the Imperium and Chaos. In this 15th video, we will explore the start of the Siege of Terra and the era of Perturabo, the Siege Master, all the way up to the Saturnine Gambit. On the 13th of Secundus, the traitors took full control of the orbit around Terra. Thereafter, their fleet spread around the entire planet and started their bombardment. For 12 days, macro-cannon batteries rained down on Terra. Only the largest cities, protected by powerful void shields, survived. Most of the planet was leveled, and billions died. Yet the Imperial Palace, located in the Himalayas, stood firm. In its heart was Sanctum Imperialis, the seat of the Emperor. Surrounding it was the Inner Palace, a gigantic city enveloped by the over 1 kilometer high Ultimate Wall. Next to the Imperial Palace was the Outer Palace, which was significantly larger and protected by the weaker 200-meter tall Eternity Wall. Connecting the two cities was Lion's Gate, a nigh impregnable fortress. Embedded into the walls were two spires that reached 80 kilometers above sea level, the Lion's Gate Spaceport and the Eternity Wall Spaceport. Hundreds of kilometers of buildings around the palace had been leveled, so that any incoming forces would either land exposed or be forced to squeeze through tight valleys onto the flat land. If any were to break through, they would encounter several lines of trenches filled with the Imperial army, which numbered 500 million soldiers at the very least, half of which were in the trenches. To protect the palace from bombardment, a grid of overlapping multi-layered void shields, called Aegis, was placed throughout the capital. The full capabilities of the Aegis were privy only to the few most loyal members of the Adeptus Mechanicus, although it was certain that no orbital bombardment would break through it. As such, the traitors spent the first 12 days of their bombardment learning how the Aegis worked. Perturabo probed how long each generator took to restart, what their range was, how they overlapped, and how long it took for the backup void shields to activate. After carefully taking notes on the palace's defense systems, Perturabo suggested that it might be easier to blow up Terra or the Sun. For now, the only possible achievement was getting an occasional single shell through, which most likely would still be shot down by the anti-air defense. Horus refused to destroy Terra, for it was to be conquered. The following day, the traitors began moving forces to the surface. All surviving cities were besieged. Almost none of the forces managed to land near the Imperial Palace, with tens of millions dying before reaching the surface. However, as the anti-air defense was occupied with destroying the shuttles, the orbital bombardment intensified. Perturabo's precise bombardment had almost no effect, but he made every shell that got past the Aegis count, damaging walls or destroying anti-air batteries. The few traitors that landed were sent on suicide attacks. However, there were too few of them to make any significant gains. Over the next few days, the traitors began using spaceships to transport troops, thereby increasing the number of forces on the surface. The loyalists reacted by scrambling fighters and gunships, and the traitors responded in kind. Amidst the chaos of dogfighting, bombardment, and ground assaults, 8 Dark Mechanicum ships landed around the palace, setting up siege camps. The growing presence of traitors on the ground forced some of the loyalist cannons to be redirected against them. Yet, the more focus that was given to the ground assaults, the more traitors landed, and their assaults became more threatening. By the 7th of Quatrus, the forward trenches had been severely depleted, and those who remained in them were irradiated and ill. 20% of the Eternity Wall was damaged from orbital bombardment, and loyalist artillery could not keep up with traitor attacks. Eventually, casualty rates decreased enough that it became acceptable to deploy Space Marines. The first of these to arrive on the surface were the Death Guard. They kept themselves outside immediate danger, instead using chemical warfare to scour the trenches and spread plagues to the city. The Blood Angels and White Scars made several sallies, but none of them managed to stop the steady traitor advance. On the 15th of Quartus, Zardu Layak conducted a chaos ritual, powering it with billions of people who had already died during the Siege of Terra. The power of the Chaos Gods gnawed even harder on the Emperor's protective aura, reducing the protection size from the entire planet to just the Imperial Palace. After the ritual was conducted, the traitor Astartes attacked the Helios Gate. The assault's scale forced loyalists to redirect artillery and bring reserves to the front, including several Titans and Sanguinius. The attack was repelled. However, it was just a distraction to occupy loyalist artillery. Meanwhile, the majority of the traitor Space Marines landed without any casualties. By now, Perturabo had enough forces on the surface to break through any fragment of Eternity's wall. Yet the Primarch decided that the main assault would be conducted on the Lion's Gate spaceport. If this spire were captured, the Loyalist forces would be split in half, and by utilizing the spaceport capabilities, the Titans could be safely transported to the surface. The traitor Perturabo and the Loyalist Rogal Dorn knew each other too well. The fight over the spaceport needed a wildcard to turn the tide of siegecraft. As such, the offensive was led by Kroger, a hot-blooded commander. He was given 25,000 Iron Warriors, with additional support from World Eaters and Emperor's Children, over 30,000 tanks and artillery, and 1.5 million foot soldiers in the traitor army. The defenders were under the command of Fafnir Ran, captain of the 1st Assault Company, who had 18,000 Imperial Fists, several hundred super heavy tanks, and 800,000 Imperial Army soldiers. The first offensive was launched on the 18th of Quartus. The traitor Imperial Army was sent without any preliminary bombardment, aiming to surprise and test the defenders' reactions. Ran sallied out, using his armoured forces as mobile walls. Imperial Fists mowed down the attackers, and cannons mounted on the spaceport rained death from the sky. In just 2 hours, 300,000 traitors died. The assault completely collapsed. Ran withdrew the infantry, leaving only tanks on the battlefield to chase down the retreating enemy. The armoured forces overextended and encountered Angron. The demon Primarch cut through them like paper, and their attacks had no effect on him. The retreat was long and costly, with barely any tanks reaching the protective aura of the Emperor. The demon Primarch could not follow them further. The first battle hurt both sides, yet there would be barely any respite. 18 hours later, on the 19th of Quartus, another assault started. It began with an orbital bombardment, which overloaded the void shields and grazed the spire. The building was depressurized, killing all who were not wearing airtight suits in the upper levels. From now on, all fighting for the peak of the spaceport would be done only by Astartes. When the shells stopped falling, a three-pronged assault was made. On the ground, the traitor army made a decoy attack. Among the cannon fodder, 1,000 Iron Warriors snuck into the lower levels, led by 1st Captain Kidimor Forex. Their mission was to disrupt enemy lines and prevent rapid redeployment by taking control of the bridges. At the top of the spire, the Iron Warriors conducted the main assault. 3,000 World Eaters also landed in their vicinity, led by Khârn. The attack was highly successful, and the traitors were winning on all fronts. The next day, 3,000 Sons of Horus, led by Abaddon and Zardu Layak, joined the attack on the upper layers. On the ground, a problem arose. When preparing for another ground assault, the Emperor's Children withdrew from combat, for they believed that their role of being a mere pinning force was not glorious enough for them. Faced with this development, Kroger decided to withhold frontal ground assaults, leaving Forex inside to die without help. Over the next 4 days, the traitors took control of the upper half of the spaceport, along with its artillery controls. On the 24th of Quartus, Ran received confirmation that reinforcements under Sigismund were incoming. However, they would arrive at the top of the spaceport. To reach him, Fafnir depleted the defenders of the lower levels, taking 10,000 Imperial Fists, and with a full force pressed upwards. With no artillery and empty posts, the ground was vulnerable. The reinvigorated traitors attacked with double effort, bringing the entire armoured column to the fight. As the Loyalists pushed up, the ground levels were being lost. On the 2nd of Quintus, Sigismund landed in the spaceport with 3,000 Imperial Fists. Ran pushed his men harder to link up with the reinforcements. The attempt was successful, yet costly. Ran had become grievously injured, forcing him to leave the battlefield. After this, Sigismund took command. His goal was to find and kill Abaddon, as keeping the spaceport was almost impossible. On the same day, the ground attack entered inside the fortress. It was just a matter of time until Sigismund would be stuck on top of the spaceport. On the 9th of Quintus, Dorn started personally involving himself in the battle for the Lionsgate spaceport. He ordered Sigismund to hold the upper layers and contacted a secret armoured division that numbered 6,000 tanks and was stationed outside the Imperial Palace. His goal was to encircle traitor forces in the Spire, with additional reinforcements coming from the city, led by the Primarch personally. This plan did not come to fruition. First, Sigismund disregarded orders, as a redeployed Abaddon was spotted on the ground levels. Then the secret armoured column was immediately destroyed from within, as its ranks were infiltrated by Terrans recruited by the Alpha Legion. Lastly, Perturabo stepped into the fight. On the following day, before Dorn even arrived, the loyalists were completely forced out of the spaceport. To the surprise of all, Forex was still alive. He had survived 3 weeks within the enemy fortress, with no respite nor reinforcements. On the 11th of Quintus, final skirmishes were taking place. Sigismund was unable to locate Abaddon. Instead, he fought against Khârn, losing the duel against the Khornite Berserker. Yet before the first captain was finished off, Dorn arrived. Zardu Layak tried to use sorcery to kill the Primarch, but it only angered Dorn. Faced with imminent death, Layak conducted yet another chaos ritual, constraining the Emperor's protection just to the inner palace. The sorcerer's life powered this ritual. His body exploded, and in its place, a portal to the warp appeared. Moments later, Dorn spotted Perturabo and offered to end this battle with a duel. Perturabo refused. Their rivalry would not be resolved by a brawl, but by the art of siegecraft. The beaten loyalists were let go. No traitor fired on the sorry remains of the withdrawing loyalist army. With the Lionsgate spaceport lost, the loyalists were split in half. Traitors jammed communications and cut off reinforcements to the outer palace. Within the next 9 days, the Eternity Wall was breached in 18 places. Additionally, the World Eaters launched an attack led by Angron from the Lion's Gate. The outer palace had only a few days until it would be overwhelmed. If the traitors took the Eternity's Wall spaceport, any attempt to evacuate from Terra would be impossible, and it would double the rate of traitor titans arriving on the surface. For now, the spaceport was a rally point for all survivors of the outer palace, but without help, it was doomed to fall. Yet, sparing any troops would be difficult, as the defense of the Lion's Gate was still ongoing. Its defenses were made out of 6 barbicans. The first of these barbicans, Kobenik, was already destroyed, but fortunately had been made impassable. Next to it was Colossi Gate, the White Scar's base of operations. Due to its proximity to the traitor-controlled spaceport, the heaviest attacks would be focused here. The other barbican most likely to be overwhelmed was the Gorgon Bar. It was once a civilian structure, only recently reinforced by Dorn. To make matters worse, an alternative way inside the inner palace was created. Due to orbital bombardment, the Earth below the Saturnine section of the Ultimate Wall cracked. The defenders didn't have enough men to hold Colossi and Gorgon barbicans, retain control over Eternity's Wall spaceport, and keep a watchful eye on the Saturnine section. This fact was also known to the traitors. Instead of fixing the breach beneath the wall, Dorn decided to turn it into a trap. The Primarch acted as if the breach wasn't detected, and sent reinforcements into the outer palace. The traitors intercepted the relief force, with only a few of them reaching the spaceport. Perturabo was still unsure whether to commit to the risky attack on the Ultimate Wall. In an attempt to shield himself from responsibility for failure, he purposefully arranged the data in a way that would allow Abaddon to spot the vulnerability. Abaddon took the bait. However, a decoy attack on the surface was needed to exploit this weakness. Tremors of a battle were made to hide the sounds of underground drills. Abaddon could not requisition the entirety of the Sons of Horus without the clearance of the War Master. This was problematic, as Horus was still on the vengeful spirit. For long hours he sat on his throne, drooling from his mouth with open, unseeing eyes, giving orders within his brief moments of lucidity. The War Master insisted that he was invading the Emperor's dreams, and was focused on dismantling the protective aura. Few trusted this explanation, as in the long periods of his slumber, he looked more like a puppet with no one pulling at his strings. Instead, Perturabo and Abaddon went to Fulgrim. His legion barely involved itself with the siege, deeming the prolonged battle as boring and unworthy of their effort. To entice the Emperor's children into the attack, the Omegon's plans of the Imperial Palace were shown. In them, below the Saturnine section, was a tunnel that led directly into the Emperor's throne room. Instead of siege warfare, Fulgrim would be involved in a coup de grace offensive. On the 22nd of Quintus, the major traitor offensive started. Lion's Gate was attacked by demons, space marines, titans, and hordes of chaos cultists. Gorgon Bar was almost lost, with 3/4 of the Barbican falling into the traitors' hands. The situation looked barely any better at Colossi Gate, with Magnus and Mortarion both involved in the attack. In that desperate state, the Barbicans received no reinforcements. Worse still, the best of the Space Marines were called off the lines by the Order of Malkador. 700 champions of mankind were secretly brought under the Saturnine section, with the White Scars, Imperial Fists, Blood Angels, Black Shields, and Knights Errant waiting in an ambush. Fortunately, the Gambit paid off. The entire 100,000-strong legion of the Emperor's children arrived at the Saturnine section. The decoy force was larger than Dorn had expected, and it alone was able to break the wall. The Emperor's children deployed heavy siege weapons, using sonic attacks to shake the 1,100-meter-tall wall to its foundations. Assault pods were launched as capsules filled to the brim with Space Marines hit the wall. Without proper cover, the siege engines were destroyed before they had managed to transport more than a third of their gathered forces. Still, the section needed immediate reinforcements, and anyone who could be spared was being redeployed here. From below the wall, 200 Space Marines under Sigismund joined the battle above, while reserves from the command came with Dorn, and many more groups were on the way. As the decoy battle above progressed to the traitors' advantage, the drills reached their destination. Within them were the best of the Sons of Horus, consisting of 3 companies led by Horus Heresy, Ezekiel Abaddon, and Tybalt Ma. The traitors outnumbered the loyalists 2-1, but their numerical advantage meant nothing. Every time a drill entered the crack below the wall, it was immediately destroyed by loyalist kill teams. It was a complete slaughter. Only 2 Sons of Horus managed to leave the Saturnine section alive. The first was Abaddon, for no chosen of Malkador could defeat him in combat. Eventually, he was the last traitor on the field, grievously wounded, without even the ability to stand. Just seconds before Garrow could finish him off, Abaddon was teleported out of the trap. At death's door, Abaddon wanted to return to his men and die with them, yet his request was denied. The second one to leave the Saturnine basements was Horus Heresy, who had snuck past the kill teams and into the inner palace. His success was short-lived, as just a few hours later, Gavial Loken caught up to him and decapitated his former battle brother. On top of the wall, Dorn dueled Fulgrim. The demon Primarch did not put his heart into the fight, taking amusement in what he thought was a futile attempt to stop a decoy attack. Over the span of the duel, Dorn revealed that the secret Sons of Horus attack had been thwarted, and that the attack on the ultimate wall had several flaws, most of them coming from hasty planning on Fulgrim's part. These blunders included a lack of proper cover for the siege engines, and the overly narrow deployment of the assault pods, which resulted in the traitors being unable to capitalize on their numerical advantage. A thought entered Fulgrim's mind. There was no perfection in this attack, no coup de grace, just another grinding siege battle. Immediately, the demon Primarch lost interest in the battle and teleported out. Without the aid of the Primarch, the Emperor's children were cleared out of the Saturnine wall over the next few hours. The Saturnine Gambit failed. Disappointed with the result, Fulgrim completely withdrew his involvement with the siege. The Lion's Gate still held, and the traitors' advance had been partially pushed back. Yet the price for the Loyalists' victory had been heavy, for the outer palace was lost. Both spaceports were now busy transporting traitor titans to the surface. How will the siege progress? What other consequences will arise from a failed attack on the Saturnine section? Find out in the next episode. Our series on the Warhammer 40k Horus Heresy will continue, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.